The enemy's #1 weapon against chosen Christians is not what most people expect. It's discouragement, that quiet, soul-draining force that whispers, "You're not enough." Even when God has already called you chosen, anointed, and set apart. Because if the enemy can't steal your salvation, he'll try to crush your spirit, dim your fire, and confuse your identity until you lay down your sword willingly. He doesn't have to take your purpose. He just needs to convince you it's pointless, and that's why your attacks feel so personal, so relentless, so oddly timed, because you are dangerous to hell's agenda, and Satan knows it. The moment you stepped into your calling, a target was painted on your back. And now the enemy comes not with horns and fire, but with silence, delays, betrayals, and internal battles that make you question God's promises. Just like Eve in the garden, he whispers half-truths that sound like logic, but are soaked in poison. Did God really say? Genesis 3:1. You fight battles in secret that no one sees, because the enemy attacks your mind long before he ever touches your circumstances, and many chosen ones feel the weight of spiritual depression without knowing its origin. They call it fatigue, burnout, anxiety. But it's a spiritual ambush designed to separate you from the presence of God, to make prayer feel dry and worship feel like a chore. He plants seeds of doubt every time your prayers seem unanswered, every time your waiting stretches longer than expected, and he knows that the longer you stare at what's not happening, the easier it is to forget what God already promised. Because faith doesn't die in storms, it dies in the silence. That's why the most dangerous moment in your life as a believer isn't when everything is falling apart, but when nothing seems to be moving and discouragement turns delay into deception, making you believe that maybe God changed his mind about you. But listen, Romans 8:28 is not a suggestion, it's a declaration, and just because the enemy is loud doesn't mean God is absent. The second weapon he loves to use against chosen ones is isolation. Not the kind you can see, but the subtle kind where you're surrounded by people yet feel entirely alone. Because isolation gives birth to distortion. Your thoughts echo unchecked, your wounds fester without truth, and the voice of God feels distant as the enemy shouts lies in your own tone of voice. Even Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, alone. Matthew 4:1. And if Satan dared to whisper to the Son of God, he will not hesitate to deceive you during your most vulnerable moments. That's why your friendships break unexpectedly, why certain people pull away, why you suddenly feel unseen by the very ones you poured into. It's not random, it's targeted, designed to strip you of covering and convince you that no one would understand your burden, that you're the only one fighting this hard for a promise no one else even believes in. The third, and perhaps most shocking weapon the enemy wields against the chosen, is false affirmation. Yes, even praise can be a weapon when it pulls you off purpose, when applause becomes louder than obedience, and you start performing for approval instead of walking in assignment. Many fall not through failure but through flattery, accepting watered-down versions of their calling to avoid discomfort, trading warfare for ease. And make no mistake, the devil doesn't always oppose you with persecution. Sometimes he offers you shortcuts that feel like blessings but lead to bondage. Remember how Satan offered Jesus the kingdoms of the world without the cross. Luke 4:5-7. That's how he seduces the chosen. He offers influence without intimacy, platform without process, fruit without roots. And if you don't stay rooted in who God says you are, you'll start redefining yourself by public opinion, not divine commission. Another hidden tactic is comparison. It's silent but lethal, especially among the chosen, because you're not called to look like them. You're called to look like Christ. But the enemy will flood your mind with images, timelines, and fake success stories until you forget that your lane was handcrafted by God himself. And you'll start rushing seasons, envying blessings that aren't yours, despising the small beginnings that God actually delights in. Zechariah 4:10. All because you look too long at someone else's journey. The enemy knows that if he can't get you to sin, he'll try to get you to strive. And that striving leads to exhaustion, not elevation. But here's the final and most dangerous weapon of all: identity confusion. Because once you forget who you are, you'll settle for who you're not. And nothing pleases hell more than a chosen one who doesn't know they're chosen. That's why every attack is aimed not just at what you do, but who you believe you are. The lies come to cancel the truth of your sonship. Romans 8:15. The accusations come to make you feel